Welcome to Backroom Talk.
Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk. I'm Georgia, here with Carl, and we're going to be talking about strength today.
We have to look at where they are in their journey of strength. And, are they day one or are they day 4,000?
Well, let's move on to the number 2 reason that people see plateaus in strength. And for us, that's not honoring physiology.
And it's not because the program was bad. It's just that the program was bad for them.
To listen to more Backroom Talk, be sure to subscribe. Learn to design personalized programs with the OPEX system of coaching by heading to opexfit.com.
Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk. I'm Georgia, here with Carl, and we're going to be talking about strength today.
Yes, strength.
And busting plateaus.
Busting plateaus.
This is coming off the back of a webinar that we hosted on the topic of strength training. So there's going to be some crossover with the content. If you guys were on that webinar, you may have heard a little bit of this conversation, but not all of it because
this is more casual, right?
Yeah,
we're just in the back room having a backroom conversation. I was going to say a backroom talk, but it didn't work.
Well, we get to be a little more loose, flying up by the seat of our pants, have a little more fun on the podcast than we do on the on our very professional webinars.
I know, right?
We're really buttoned up. We put on our OPEX suits and ties for webinars, but podcast is chill.
Yeah, I'm gonna wear a tuxedo on that one.
Love it.
I'm gonna go tux.
Very good. Very nice.
Me and Jacob were talking about doing a not casual Friday. So because you know how we like,
yep,
he'll wear like khakis or something, or like jean shorts or something like that. I was like, what are you doing, man? Like, why aren't you wearing Lululemon shorts? We're going to take that to the next level. We're going to come in with tuxedos.
I like that. It's one of the problems of working in fitness, whether you're like working for an education company like us or you're a coach, you never have the opportunity to like dress up. Right? You live in yoga pants.
I don't think that's a problem.
I love it too. I don't think I could ever like go to the corporate world now.
Yeah, if I had to dress a certain way, I wouldn't conform. But I think it's moving away from that now, like because tech companies are taking over, right?
Yep.
So it's like
T-shirts and hoodies.
Yeah, it's just come in casual, do your thing behind the computer, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean the remote push last year, where everyone got to wear pajamas for a year. I feel like
no pants.
That pushed it in that direction.
Have you ever done
too.
it? Did you ever do like the no pants?
I didn't do the no pants on a call. I did like pajama bottoms on a call, but not no pants. I don't often wear no pants around my house, to be honest. Like there's normally some kind of pant on.
Okay. We'll leave it
but
there.
Each to their own. If you have stories, did you ever go no pants on a call?
No. God, I have children. I'm not walking around like... Yeah, you know what I was going to say.
All right. Well, let's get back to the topic of conversation for today, which is strength, specifically 4 reasons that people often plateau in their strength progression. And then we're going to offer up some solutions to actually be able to address them before we get to the episode. Guys, as always, take a second, leave us a review. That stuff like really means a lot, and it's massively beneficial for us to be able to keep putting out good content. So if you're on podcast, leave a review on the app. If you're on YouTube, a little like and a subscribe never hurts. So go ahead and do those things too, please. All right.
What she said.
What I said.
What she said.
So let's dig into it.
Yeah.
So building strength, number 1 problem, not like the most important problem, but in the order of operations for our reasons that
I actually
people
think this
plateau.
is the number 1 problem.
It probably is, right? Because
Yeah, for most people.
They're entering strength, right? It's they're not ready to be strong yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we have to look at where someone is in their journey of becoming strong. And for context, I think we roll through this conversation today with thinking, this person or this avatar, their goal is to be as strong as possible.
Yep.
So with that being said, we have to look at where they are in their journey of strength. And, are they day 1 or are they day 4,000, right? Because there's some differences between those and what they can actually express on day 1 versus day 4,000. So I think we have to look into where they're at in their life cycle.
Walk us through a little bit what that life cycle means. So someone day 1 versus, day 500 versus day 2,000. What are some of the variations in what that person is able to do in strength work?
Yeah, gosh. So we'd have to put resistance training, like strength work is a part of resistance training, right? So everything is a part of resistance training, like hypertrophy, strength, everything sits inside of just doing resistance. So with that being said, it's like strength has it has its time, right? Where it needs to, let's just call it like shine or be the priority. But when someone comes in day one, it's like you have to learn how to move. It's all about learning movements. And you can, let's just say the bench squat and the deadlift, just because it's just like classic in most people's heads. But I think we should expand outside of that in this conversation. But let's say it is just the bench squat and deadlift. It's like people need to learn how to do those movements instead of coming in and doing, a program that they found online that says, they're going to put, 50 pounds on each one of those lifts in 6 months, which can be done. But day one, the person should think about, hey, I need to master these movements. I need to master these patterns inside of these movements. And if you are in a rush, right, if you're in a rush and you do put on 50 pounds in 6 months, which is absolutely doable for a beginner, what's being left behind in that pursuit? Because if the only goal in that 6 months is load, and it's not, I want to master the movement, that person's potential to be as strong as possible 3 years from their starting date is a lot lower than if they were to come in and say, hey, I want to master these movements. I want to feel contractions. I want to understand patterning. I want to, be able to come in and effectively move this relatively heavy load. So day one, you need to think about, day one through day 1,000 needs to be mastering the movements and the movement patterns.
I think that is where both clients, so people wanting to get strong, and then coaches as well, get a little bit confused in that you can throw this templated strength progression at a novice lifter and have them bench squat dead 5x5 or 5-3-1 or whatever it might be, and they'll put 50 pounds on their lifts in that 6 month period and have great success. And they're like, okay, this worked. Why wouldn't it work again? You do something once, it works for you, you think it's going to work again. And that's where they get frustrated, is when that doesn't work again. For some people, they lift for 6 months and then they're kind of out, and you hear those success stories. And I think that's where coaches and clients get caught up, getting confused, thinking that this strength programming has to look like this. Someone has to be doing, this typical classic strength program, because they see those results, but they don't see 6 years down the track. Mm-hmm. We never hear about what that person is doing 6 years from now. They probably moved on to another hobby. They're probably not lifting weights anymore.
Yeah. I mean, just talking about the day one person, it's so important to understand what is their goal. You know what I mean? Not everyone's goal is to bench squat and deadlift as much weight as possible. Most people's goal is not to bench squat and deadlift as much weight as possible. So there has to be a connection to the long term in that initial starting point. So I think everyone needs to master movement, right? If someone wants to go into the gym and they want to be in there for any amount of time and they want to do resistance training, step one for anyone is to master movement patterns, no matter what their goal is. So that's, someone that's like, hey, I just want to move to be healthy and fit and, have some fun with resistance. They need to master movement patterns. Someone that comes in, they're like, I want to, compete in the USPL in 10 years and I want to squat as much as I possibly can when I'm 35 years old. That person needs to also master the squat pattern. So their starting points will look very similar, but where they're going from that starting point needs to be identified, or there needs to be a conversation that happens. Because there's a lot of people that come in and they do say, oh, I just want to move to be healthy. And they fall in love with the iron and putting on weight, and they feel really good putting weight on the bar, and they feel really good. And there's something's just lit up inside of them. They're like, I love this. And that person might actually turn into the person that's like, oh man, I want to squat, bench, and deadlift as much as I possibly can. And you saw that a lot in CrossFit gyms, right? With weightlifting, where people are like, oh, I'm just coming in to lose some weight. And they do some variations of a snatch and clean, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the most challenging thing I've ever done. And then you have the gyms that have the barbell clubs, and that starts to get more popular than the CrossFit side, because people just fell in love with lifting in the snatch and in the clean. So I think people's goals can pivot. Or the person that comes in and they say, I want to bench, squat, and deadlift as much as I possibly can in 10 years, they could fall in love with the process and just be like, gosh, I don't want any pressure attached to this. I just really love coming in and training, right? I love, feeling the results of doing a bunch of really good resistance training, and they could actually flip and turn into the person that's like, no, I don't really want to bench squat and deadlift as much as I can. I just want to do this for longevity purposes.
Well, the great thing about that is you give someone the opportunity to discover that rather than cramming them into this like very specific, we're following this program with these very specific performance goals connected to getting stronger. You start them off where everyone needs to begin, which is developing efficiency and movement patterns. And they have years to figure out, what do I actually enjoy? What do I want out of my fitness? Do I just enjoy the process? Do I actually want to go and compete in some kind of weightlifting or powerlifting competition? You give people the opportunity to do that by having experiences in fitness first, because I don't think any of us actually know what we want from fitness when we enter it initially, especially when it comes to performance goals, right? Like you hear a person like, I want to increase my back squat, I want to run a marathon. It's because they've seen someone else do those things and they've decided that that's going to be the thing that gets them to their ideal version of fitness. But the reality is that that looks different for everyone, and they might get 6 months in and realize that's not the goal anymore. Yep. So you give people freedom to be able to explore when you start by developing patterns and efficiency. And one other, I guess, really important takeaway from what you said there, Carl, is that it's not just the goal that dictates the program. We have to think about where that person is starting from and their capabilities as well. And I think that most clients have a very goal-centric idea around what a program should be, i.e. this program has to be connected directly to my goal. And coaches as well, as they're starting, to try and figure out program design. So making sure people understand there are many factors that go into deciding the right program for someone, including, past experiences in fitness.
Yeah, to make it easy to, answer your first question of like the, day 1 versus day 400 versus day 4,000, I think we could just set up like a very easy, typical volume and intensity curve, right? Where it's like, day 1, volume is here. Right? Intensity's here. Day 400, volume actually doesn't do this while intensity does this. They almost do that, right? And then we get to like day 4,000, and now we're like, we're hitting, true maximum potential, 1 rep maxes and all of that. Volume starts to dip down, and then intensity takes a very sharp turn upward. So I don't know if you're watching, you kind of saw that, but if you could just imagine that in your head, day 1, volume is high, intensity is low. Day 400, volume increases, right? 'Cause you're doing more work while intensity increases. And then you'll start to see that intersection where we typically see on that volume and intensity curve.
How do we know when someone is ready to see that volume intensity intersection, where they're ready to start dropping volume and start like increasing intensity, which is what we'd associate with typical strength training?
Yeah, I think you got to feel that out, right? Like, I don't know if we could. What was the last download that we put out? Was that the strength one, or 2 downloads ago?
That was the...
Did we have a strength life cycle?
We did, yeah. The strength life cycle was in that. We can drop that in the notes for people to download and check out.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to like jump the gun and tell people to download something we didn't have available.
We do.
But yeah, download that and just take a look at it. And there's like it's a framework, right? It's like, day 1, you're here. Day 4,000, you're there. But even inside of that, you still got to feel it out, right? Like, the best way, in my opinion, to understand if someone's ready for it is you got to give it to them and see how they respond to it.
Yeah.
But you have to work inside of a framework. That doesn't mean give someone something on day 1 and see if they respond. It's like follow that framework and, use your best judgment, right? They get to day 300 instead of 400. And it's like you think they're ready for, more intensity and more volume. Let's just call it more tonnage in their training program. Give it to them and see if they respond well to it. And what does responding well mean? Responding well means that they're getting better week over week in terms of the amount of load that they can lift. It means that they're recovering cycle over cycle, and they're seeing gains, let's call it, right? They're not getting injured. They're not hitting a heavy squat session on Monday and not recovering to the following Tuesday, right? Like little things like that. We can just give those to people and just see if they respond well to them.
And to, I guess, directly link to this example of the person who's not ready to be strong, the classic thing that you might see with that client when you put them underneath the barbell and ask them to, hit a heavy 3 or whatever it might be, is number one, that load is just like very low. And you as a coach can objectively look at that and say, like, that is not heavy for that person. It is heavy for them today, but it is not an absolutely heavy load.
Yep.
But number 2, seeing that they're just unable to organize movement in the pattern. And what's happening is that like movement is actually breaking down. It's not that they're unable to like really dig in and like overcome that load. They just like can't figure out what their elbows need to be doing when they bench press. They don't know how to, you know, engage their glutes. So the actual movement is what is limiting them versus like that ability to overcome that external load.
Yeah, and as a coach, it's like you have to use discretion, right? Something that comes to mind is when I used to work with high school kids. You know, there was this one kid, he was probably 16 or 17 years old, and this kid could squat. Like, we never 1RM'd him, but I'm sure he was over like 475, 480 in a 1 rep max squat because I saw how he moved 395, 405. And something we did with that kid, we're like, gosh, he is really strong, but he's not ready to be strong, right? He was still growing. He had dealt with some injuries. That's actually why he came to us. He dealt with a bunch of injuries because he was one of those like go-getter kids that was just like always trying to get better. So it was like we had to hold that kid back because we made the judgment call of like, this kid isn't ready to be strong yet. And we can make him really weight room strong and high five, but we're probably not setting him up for best successes on the field, right? So that was one kid where it was like, and he would get upset, right? He really wanted to, you know, balls to the wall, like, hey, I want to try to back squat 500 pounds. And it's like, hey, man, you don't really need to back squat 500 pounds, right? His movement quality was okay. It wasn't great. We could have kind of pushed it over the edge a little bit to put a couple more pounds on, but it was clear that he wasn't ready to move that load because it was just like, it was just a subjective thing. You see the kid move and you're like, let's just back it up there. I think we're okay. Like, you're not, you know, your squat 1 rep max or lack thereof is not holding you back from being a better football player, right? So, you know, in strength conditioning and a lot of coaches that coach people in the weight room, we're so attached to what happens in the weight room and we forget how that connects to other things, right? So that's very, you know, one specific example of, you know, sport carryover. But we could also look at a kid like CJ Cummings. I remember when he was in Beaufort, South Carolina, his coach was like renowned for holding that kid back because he was that kid, but like times 2. This kid was squatting like over 500 pounds. They never 1 rep max cleaned him, but he was cleaning like 400. And this kid was like 16 or 17 years old. Do you know who CJ Cummings is? And his coach was like, he's never hit a 1 rep max. And it was crazy to hear. It's like, what do you mean? He's competing in Olympic weightlifting. And his coach is just like, he's just not ready yet. He's not ready. He's strong enough to go and win without actually digging in. There's still some work to be done with this kid. And now you see what the kid's doing. It's not a kid anymore, but you see what he's doing. And I don't know what the guy's maximum potential is, but I think it was the right call at 16 and 17 to hold him back a little bit so he can kind of ride that wave of, you know, volume, decrease, intensity, boom, now go and peak when you're 24, 25 years old for the Olympics. So just, you know, very 2 different examples, but there's some synergies in like, you know, a coach subjectively saying, you're just not ready to be strong yet.
Yeah, it takes a lot of trust on the part of the client to accept that sometimes, right? You got to have a good relationship with that person to hear you're not ready to do that and to accept that and be okay with it and be like, okay, but in 8 years, I'm going to be ready to do that.
Yeah, you just got to tell them why, right? And like, I think there's some trust built there because as a strength coach or just a coach in general, you want your people to succeed inside of your 4 walls, right? So for you to say, hey, you know, I know you could do more. I'm going to hold you back for your best interest. That's actually putting your best interest aside because a coach's best interest is to say, boom, here we go. I'm going to post this on Instagram. My athlete, my client just hit a 600-pound back squat, but that coach is in the background. They're like, actually, I don't really give a shit about that. I care about this individual's best interest and what's best for them. So just having that conversation with them, I think will pay huge dividends. Obviously, there's going to be people that aren't going to be on board with that, but as a coach, you have to have your limits, and it's like, are you going to let your client dictate the program or not?
For sure. As a coach, you got to understand the principles of the strength life cycle first, though, to be able to communicate that to people. And I do think it's a good opportunity with the right client who maybe is pushing back a little bit or wants to understand the why behind it, sit down with them with that infographic and like actually walk them through, like print that thing out or open it up on your phone, whatever. Don't print it out. That's no one prints things anymore, do they? But open it up on your iPad and like walk them through what their progression over the next 50 years is going to look like, because that's an exciting thing to see that laid out. I just think most coaches aren't really equipped to understand what that looks like in the true long term.
Yeah.
And most clients have never considered it before.
Yeah. I know we've been on this one for a while, but I think it's important. You could do 10s with a client, like 10s, like, 3 sets of 10, 5 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, whatever that is. You could do 10s with someone for a really long period of time, and that person could still see a lot of results, right? And a lot of strength gains. If you have a client that's getting really strong off of 10s, that tells you that they're not ready to get strong off of 5s yet. If that makes sense,
For
right?
sure.
It's like keep giving them volume, because there's some learning that's happening there. There's something that's happening at a neurological level that's happening there that's actually making them stronger, and you don't need more intensity to do that. So tap that thing out before you go down to the 5s. Tap the 5s out before you go down to the 1s, 2s, and 3s. I know that's like way oversimplified, but sometimes I think it's good to be oversimplified. It's just like, we're going to give you 10s for a couple of years.
For sure.
We'll vary up exercises and tempos and all that stuff, but we're just going to stick with 10s.
Because the sad thing is, once you move past that, sometimes you lose the opportunity to go back to it,
Yes, you
and
do.
you limit someone's potential and they never, hit that number that they wanted to hit because you were in a rush for them to get better.
Yeah. Be patient. Gosh. Yeah. Hopefully we all have a lot of time. Most people have a lot of time. So I think people just need to be patient, and that strength life cycle and that framework gives us something to refer back to and like check us, right? Where it's like, gosh, no, maybe I don't need to do singles yet. I'm only in month 13 of this thing.
For sure. Well, let's move on to the number 2 reason that people see plateaus in strength. And for us, that's not honoring physiology.
Oh, maybe this is number 1. I'm going to say this to everyone. Maybe this is number 1.
Which one's most important? Well, tell us what this means, Carl, and how you do honor physiology.
Yeah, I think this is, how do we recover, right? Strength is so recovery based.
Yep.
And I know we've talked about this before, but we get confused sometimes. We think that doing more is always better. And it is in some aspects, right? Like growing muscle tissue. Doing more is almost always better, because you have to adapt to that muscle tissue trauma. With strength, it's the complete opposite, right? If the goal is to be as strong as possible, you want to get away with doing as little as possible while still seeing those strength gains and strength adaptations. And a lot of people fall into the, I'm kind of jumping in the next one, so I'll leave this to lifestyle. So recovery is really important. So what we do in the gym obviously is going to influence, like if we're doing a good program, right, that we can recover from, that's going to influence what we need to do or not do outside of the gym to recover from that work. So recovery is so important. So when we think about recovery, it's like, what do we do outside of the gym that can lead to better levels of recovery, right? It's like, we call it like, pacing or aerobic work and just moving blood. So yeah, blood movement outside of the gym is super important to recover, especially from a strength adaptation perspective. So that doesn't mean being in the gym and doing assault bike intervals and row intervals and stuff like that. That just means like, hey, get outside, right? It's like 2 birds with 1 stone. Another thing that we would talk about is just get a lot of sun, right? Get outside, get some sunshine on your skin, move. It's like go for walks, right? Drink enough water, get enough sleep, right? I think everyone knows that you need to get sleep to recover and adapt from the work that you did prior and the work that you're going to do tomorrow. So yeah, just the lifestyle factors are really important.
For sure. And just to, I guess, clarify a little bit on the physiology side, because when someone's training hypertrophy, right, the idea is you're doing more because you're trying to break down and then repair and grow muscle tissue. On the strength side, what is happening and what are we actually like recovering from?
Are we going to move to doing too much?
I guess they do kind of overlap. We can.
Yeah, let's hit these two together, right?
Sounds
so this
good.
is just like, let's just say honoring physiology is we're talking about recovery, and we're talking about the amount of work that you're doing in the gym. So
Yep.
the work you're doing outside of the gym and the work that you're doing in the gym. So to your question, sorry, what was your question? The difference between strength and hypertrophy and what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so strength, first we have to be really clear, right? Do higher amounts of muscle tissue, can those directly lead to increased strength? Yes, they can, right? So, that's why, in block periodization, that's why there's a hypertrophy phase, and there's a strength phase, and then there's another hypertrophy phase, right? So those things do marry well together. But when we get to the intensification phase or the strength building phase, we have to lose everything that we're thinking that we need to do or that we did in that hypertrophy phase. And I know a lot of people feel this way. They'll come in the gym and they're like hitting triples in the back squat. They're hitting like 6 sets of 3 with 3 to 8 minutes rest between each triple. And then they might do some hamstring curls and some leg extensions, and then they're out. And they're like, do I need to like cash out? Do I need to do a drop set? Do I need to do, right? It's like,
What's the finisher, coach?
Yeah, seriously. Because it's like they're thinking in that like, I need to do more. I need to wreck muscle tissue. That is not the case when we're talking about getting stronger. So getting stronger is literally you go into the gym, you move 300 pounds. It feels really heavy. You're like, okay, move that for my 8 sets of 3 or my 6 sets of 3. I recovered. I'm coming back 4 days later, and now I want to move 310 pounds, and I want it to feel the same, right? I don't want it to feel easier because that tells me that the 300 I didn't really like dig in. I want it to feel the same, right? And then I'm coming back, and I'm doing 310, 315, and I want it to feel the same, right? That's someone that's getting stronger, right? So let's just call it like RPE. Their RPE is exactly the same each one of those weeks, but they're just adapting to it. When they pull the barbell out of the rack and they come back, they're like, yeah, this doesn't feel too bad, right? I know we've all been in the situation where we've pulled the barbell out of the rack and we're like, oh my God.
That person's not recovered.
How am I going to go down and up with this barbell, right? That's the person that's doing like fucking drop sets and cash outs, 4 days earlier before they're coming back to do that same session. So when we start talking about adaptation, we're not growing muscle tissue. So we don't have to annihilate muscle tissue in strength training. In strength training, it's a, let's just call it a CNS adaptation. It's a neurological adaptation. We just want our body to be recovered enough to have the oomph to get out of the bottom of a squat, to pull on a deadlift, right? Those little things. So they're just different.
Are the recovery practices for someone that is engaged in like that volume work different to the recovery practices from someone who's doing like strength max contraction work?
No, they're the same. Yeah. They're the same. It's just less important. Yeah, it's less important when you're doing volume, right? It's like, you don't really give a shit how the barbell feels when you step it out when you're doing 60% of your 1 rep max for 15 reps. All you care about is, do I feel the blood in my VMO? And you know what I mean? Like, do I feel the muscle tissue being destroyed, essentially, in hypertrophy training? It doesn't really matter, right? Because that 60% isn't going to feel like 120% for that person. So the hypertrophy individual can come in day over day, less recovered. Not they can, they usually do. That's the whole point of an accumulation phase, right? Like, you're adapting to a lot of work being stacked on top of each other. That's not to say that you should be fucking off and have terrible recovery practices. No, it's not that. Your recovery practices should still be solid, just as solid as they would be in a strength phase. It's just the recovery that is allowed to occur between those sessions is a lot greater in a strength session, and it's less important in an accumulation or hypertrophy cycle.
So, and I guess we kind of let these two pieces bleed in together. The not honoring physiology as a problem and then the doing too much as a problem. Ultimately, they're going to present in a similar way, i.e. that person's going to put that bar on their back. They're going to step 1, 2 set off the rack, and they're going to be like, fuck this, I can't lift this weight, because they're either doing too much or they're not recovering appropriately. How do you figure out which like camp you fall into?
Ask that one more time. The camp in terms of,
is the recovery the issue, or are you doing too much in training?
Oh, gotcha. Gosh, I don't think that's like a physical feeling, because those things would those things would present the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, that it's
Yeah.
going to feel the same for that person. So how do they look at them?
Are you nudging me into the next point?
I've forgotten what our next point is.
That's what I would say.
Very true.
Yeah, that's what I would say. You have to look at the program.
Yeah, so doing the wrong program, that's point number 4.
Yeah, it's like, what are your experiences in doing a program like this before? Because the only way, because when we start talking about individualization, it is so n equals 1, right? If someone let's say someone has been training, I'm not even going to use the name. I'll use the name in a second, and then this will connect. Let's say someone was squatting 4 times a week, 5 times a week. They were doing an unbelievable amount of volume on Monday. On Wednesday, they were doing an unbelievable amount of intensity. On Thursday, they were doing an unbelievable amount of volume. On Saturday, they're doing an unbelievable amount of intensity, right? Like, let's say someone trained like that, and they like have adaptations, they feel good, they're recovering well, everything's fine. And you give that person a Smolov program, squat program. That person might be okay because they've always trained like that, right? So when we start looking at the individual and what their previous experiences are, what's worked for them, what hasn't, that's worked for them. So you throw a program like that to them and they're like, this is fine. My volume actually went down. Like, I'm losing gains here, right? Then you have someone that trains quote unquote smart, right? And they squat twice a week, right? One of those squat sessions, they're hitting like some fairly tough, like 8 RPE doubles and triples. The other squat session, they're doing like varied squat pattern exercises where they're just getting in a lot of volume, right? So they might be doing like leg extensions and cyclist squats, just like speed back squats, whatever that is. And that's how that person always trains, right? They have like what we call like a max effort day, and then they have like a hypertrophy or a speed day in the squat. And they've done that for a decade. You give that person the Smolov program, how do you think they're going to respond?
Trashed.
It's going to fucking suck, right? Like they're going to feel that what we talked about before, where they pull off the barbell on that Saturday where they're supposed to get really intense, and they're going to be like, I can't do this, right? Like, this program says I have to do 92.67% of my 1 rep max, and I can't even stand up, but I got to follow the program. So what happens? They squat down, they hurt their knee, they fail, whatever happens, right? And it's not because the program was bad. It's just that the program was bad for them, right? They weren't prepared to do that. They have no experience doing that. Maybe there should be a ramp-up phase to getting into a design like that. So, yeah, you have to look at the program. What we have, it's like honor the individual, right? Assess them. Are they capable of doing this? And that's not like testing their 1 rep max. Assess through a consultation. Have a conversation with them and just ask them what kind of squat programs they've done in the past. Because I can't think of any individual design coach, let's call it OPEX coach, that would sit down in front of someone that was brand new to training and say, well, got this cool Smolov thing. You said you wanted to get strong, and just give it to them. It's like, we'd laugh at that, right? But that's happening out there.
For sure. Well, I think with the doing the wrong program piece as well, coming back to recovery practices have to sit inside the program, and that's where strength programs fall short so often. Especially, you take that template from online, you take that Smolov program and you start following it. There's no recovery built in. There's no conversation around nutrition and how to fuel to recover from that work or going into the gym. There's no conversation around like getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep because of the huge CNS demand that's going on. So making sure that inside of that program you have those recovery pieces built in, because if they're not, then that's probably the problem.
Yeah, and recognize when you give a bad program. Like, I still coach a few people, and I still give a couple bad programs here and there, but I think I recognize them soon enough where it's not like detrimental, and I pivot that thing up a little bit, right? I can think of a couple off the top of my head where it's like starting new training cycles, and it's like, whoop, I actually misjudged that a little bit, but I'm like super open, and I'm like, hey, let's, I was wrong here. Let's back off. We're going to do this thing instead. I just think of someone, Sean McCullough, I gave him something like, it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Because we were like accumulation, hypertrophy, and I gave him, I think I gave him like, I think it was like giant sets or something like that. And he's like, dude, like, I was only able to get through 2 sets of this. And I'm like,
destroyed.
I'm like, I'm sorry. Let me back up. We'll kind of back this thing up. We'll go try sets next week. But yeah, like, that happens all the time in our model. Like, we give the wrong designs sometimes. But the beauty is that we have the opportunity to pivot and change that thing up. We just have to be able to recognize if it's the wrong design. And going back to what we talked about before, it's like, how do you recognize that? Someone's not able to do it, they're not able to recover from it, or you're not seeing results, whatever results mean for that program. So when you set a program out, have some check-ins, right? It's like, what's the point of this program? What is this program supposed to do? If you're in, 6 weeks of that program and you check in on week 3 and you're like, actually, this person's getting weaker. It's like, why are they getting weaker? Is it the program? Is it something that they're doing in lifestyle? Is it a combination of the two? Maybe you have to, bring back some of the program because there's some uncontrollables of lifestyle that they just can't handle, right? So, yeah, I mean, I know I just threw a bunch of like variables, but that's what coaching is, right? It's like, that's the art of coaching.
Definitely. Well, I want to visit the examples you gave just before of that person who's been doing the max effort day, high volume day, max effort day, high volume day. They love a small off program. It's actually less than they were doing before compared to the person that is coming from our idea of like smart program design into small off and the two different experiences they would have there. Now, for a coach that is starting like brand new with a client, that is almost like a little like cautionary tale as to why you don't want to give someone too much volume and intensity too early on, because if you don't keep adding, they're going to start getting weaker, or start like, seeing detrimental results, or, they're just going to age faster and experience more wear and tear on their joints. Yeah. So for that first person, you like kind of bucket it out. We want to stay away from that, where they go into the small love program and absolutely like love it and just like want more to a point. Like there's a time in someone's life where that can happen, but we don't want it to happen too soon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else I was going to say on top of that.
The thing that, if I could add something to that, the thing that came to mind, gosh, what year was this? Forgive me if I'm out of the loop. This might still be a big thing, but 2015, 2016, that whole like squat every day thing, where it's like, all I do is squat every day, 365 days straight, 600 days straight, been squatting for 800. It's like, where are those people now, right? If you do something too much, what happens when you take that thing away, right? And that's why we have to be very patient, and we have to really think about, where is this thing going long term? Because if the only goal in fitness was to get as good as we can as fast as possible, we would talk about program design completely different, right? Like, you look at a program design that just looks fucking stupid. You're like, why would you do that? That is going to destroy you. And you look at a quote-unquote smart program design, you put those things next to each other and you give them to the same, let's say there's two humans that were exactly the same physiologically, right? Like adaptation-wise, everything, training age, everything. We give those two programs and we're like, we want you to get as good as possible in 90 days. Who's going to get better faster?
The crazy program. For sure,
right? You look at 9 months later, 18 months later, 24 months later, it's like, the person with the goal is the person with the smarter program, quote unquote, depending on what their training age is and their experiences. Let's say they're an intermediate, right? 24 months later, we want that person to still be getting better. But the person that just went balls to the wall for 3 months and they're like, I'm doing this program design that's just throwing everything at me, that person is going to get they're going to get really good really fast. And then they're not like, what do you do? What do you do now, right? To your point, do you just keep giving them that? Because for them to continue to adapt, you have to keep giving them that. If you take some of that away, what's going to happen? They're going to get worse.
Yep.
And I remember when I used to, back in my day, when I used to coach a bunch of athletes, I would see that all the time. And I didn't recognize it. I was like, why are these people getting worse? I'm giving them such pristine program designs. These things are perfect, right? Like, in my young, dumb head. And what I realized very quickly was they're coming from something that was so different and so much more high volume than what I was giving them that I was actually making them worse. So it's almost like, I don't want to compare this to like heroin addiction, right? But it's like, how do you get someone off of a really strong drug? You give them a little bit less of that drug, right? Like you have to wean them off of that thing. It's the same thing with like the Smoloff person that's been doing that for 24 months. It's like you have to wean them off of that or else they're going to get really weak and they're not going to be happy. And be like, why am I paying you? I'm getting worse. It's like, yeah, you're getting worse because we're actually rehabbing you. And remember, James used to always talk about, he kind of does a little bit still. He used to always talk about like rehabbing CrossFitters.
Yeah.
That's what he meant, right? That's what he meant. It's like, they've been doing a bunch of shit for, a long time. And then they finally came to James and they're like, this shit ain't working anymore. And James is like, well, you fucked yourself up pretty good, right? Now we have to rehab you, right? Now that's a long process. And then it's like, okay, now we're at baseline. Now let's start to add some things on and make you better.
I think, how reverse dieting is a whole big thing in the interwebs right now. It's very popular.
Is it?
The concept of reverse dieting is a pretty hot one. I think we could come up with some kind
I
of...
feel so out of the loop.
You deleted Instagram off your phone.
I know.
You're just not going to know anything anymore.
I know. I get my news from you though, Georgia.
Here we go. I don't know if I'm a reliable news source for pop culture, but in the fitness pop culture world, reverse dieting is being talked about a lot at the moment.
Who's the leader?
I don't know.
That?
I honestly don't know. I just hear it a lot.
I remember Lane used to crush that. I don't know if he talks about that a bunch anymore.
It's probably a trickle down effect. Other people just like jumping on, and it's kind of the like rehabbing CrossFit thing. It's like rehabbing people who've been sucked into diet culture for too long. But I think there's something in reverse program design coming off the back of like way too much volume and intensity. We could market that and sell it as online template.
Yeah, we
wouldn't do that.
We could be the rehab company. Fuck, we don't want to be that.
We don't want to.
No, but I bet if we look in a bunch of our old program designs, and if we take people that are working a lot with athletes right now, like Sam Smith and Henry and McElroy and those guys, we could probably look into what they're doing with the rehabilitation of the athletes that come to them. There's some interesting stuff in that.
Definitely.
I could think of like 15 people off the top of my head that I'm like, oh, I remember writing those programs.
Yeah.
And how brutal that was. And consultation was so important with those people.
I was going to say.
So important. No, I'm not going to say her name. One person comes to mind, and it's like, we still joke about that today. Like, remember like 6 years ago when we first got going and how fucking brutal that was? Because it was just like we were like not on the same wavelength, and it was like to drive that point home of like what I thought we needed to do was so difficult with her, with them, giving it away. But anyway, yeah, there's something there. The rehabilitation. Fitness. We don't want to work with, not that we don't want to work with those people, but we want coaches to be very proactive in that, right?
Definitely. Start from the beginning.
We need to spread that word of, what the hell is your ideal version of fitness today?
Absolutely.
And what does that mean for you in 50 years?
Absolutely. Well, I think when it comes to like strength plateaus and the reasons that they occur, often it is some blend of all four of these reasons. Like they typically don't occur in isolation. So it's always worth considering all of the main points that we've run through today.
Yep.
We had the webinar on the topic as well. So for those that are interested in like a little bit of a different view into what we discussed, we will link that in the description so you guys can go and watch that webinar replay. And see you next week.
All right. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.